Hello, I'm Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing this wonderful day? Couple programming, real quick programming note. Next week, you'll probably only get one or two podcasts from me. I am going on a family vacation, much needed. Looking forward to that. I'm not going to be recording from the beach. However, it's been known to happen that I've gone away on vacations and something big happens. I'll have my laptop there. I might not have the best sound, but I will probably react if they trade for Brandon Ayuk while I'm at the beach, So just there's that. Speaking of wide receivers, today's podcast is about more George Pickens stuff, and then the second half, more Mike Tomlin stuff. If you've been following, thank you and appreciate it. But very recently, over the last 5 podcasts or so, I've done an exclusive one on Tomlin, obviously right after his contract, and I did an exclusive one on Pickens. And I will say the comments for those very strong, I'll say. I mean, like strong-willed, opinionated comments for those two. Mostly in the Pickens world, telling me that I'm selling him short, he's a superstar, he's perfect, blah, blah, blah. In the Tomlin world, it's almost 50% of you are thrilled with it, 50% of you can't stand it. And of course, I'm generalizing. And I get that. And we'll get to Tomlin here in a minute. But I have 3 or 4 notes on each subject that I want to talk about now that just further keeping the discussion alive. And this has nothing to do with Pickens. I still think the Steelers can and should and are exploring all options for a starting type wide receiver. But how about this? 35 wide receivers last year had 100 targets. Okay? 35 had 100 targets. Pickens came in 25th out of 35 in catchable target rate. What that means is a quarterback drops back, deems you to be open as a receiver, or at least open enough to throw the football your way, chooses to throw the football to you, and he was amongst the worst of people saying it was a catchable ball. I mean, catchable ball for George Pickens is a pretty wide strike zone. So, by the way, some of the ones at the absolute bottom of the league are Atlanta. I mean, just an Arthur Smith note. Wow. I mean, Kyle Pitts is a tight end. It was like 60% of his passes were deemed catchable. I mean, London, really, really low too. But anyway, 69% of Pickens' targets were rated as catchable. Now, we could fight over 5 or 6 of them. I don't know who's ranking, who's doing the actual analysis, but it's really low. I mean, think about that. Quarterback drops back, throws you the football, and 30% of the time, it's not even catchable. That's rough, man. I mean, that's really rough. Like, it's in the seats. It's bouncing to you. I mean, that's really rough. And hey, I dinged him on some of his effort, frankly, body language. But that gets old. I mean, that gets old. I did my job. I earned the target. Targets are earned, as I always tell you. I earned the target. And 30% of the time, you can't even get to the point where I can get a hand on it. Because if I get a hand on it, there's a good chance it's coming in if I'm George Pickens. So to take that a step further, his average yards per target is 10.8 yards downfield. That was the highest in the league of all 35 of those teams, of those receivers. Probably doesn't shock you. A lot of go routes, a lot of deep stuff. I think that his route tree will continue to get more and more diverse as it did from year 1 to year 2. But his average depth per target was the highest in the league of those 35. But now we get back to accuracy. Russell Wilson is one of the most accurate deep ball passers in the entire league. So assuming some of that all keeps up, the numbers are going to come. I know I said bad things about Pickens. I think he has a lot of work to do. I don't think he's a number one. But my version of a number one has a list of like 7 or 8 players. I mean, it's Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. These are studs. And I do think Pickens could get there. But these are some more encouraging things. And hey, I'm not trying to get you back on my good graces, or you guy back on my, however that works, me back in your good graces. I'm just telling you more things I found that I want to talk about. And there's another thing I want to talk about is if you listen to that podcast, his production versus zone was awful as a rookie, and it went from awful to pretty bad in year 2. His stuff versus press man and man in general was really, really good. One is much more important than the other, and it's the man coverage stuff, especially press. Now, I also will tell you, I believe that zone coverage production for a pass catcher has a lot to do with scheme. And scheme sure did not help Pickens at all. If you know zone's coming or you check the zone beaters, you can scheme guys open versus zone. It's not that I'm sure he has his deficiencies in zone. He definitely does. When do I break this off? When does the cover 2 corner pass me off? And all that type of thing. And reading coverage on the fly is not easy. But I will say his zone production being much worse than his man production is a good thing. I also want to read you this. Since being selected with the 52nd pick in the draft in 2022, Pickens has caught passes from a combination of Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph, who have combined for just 27 total passing touchdowns in that span. Those 3 quarterbacks combined, since Pickens have been drafted, have thrown only 27 touchdown passes. It's kind of mind-boggling. Still, in his second year, he almost had 1,200 yards and 5 touchdowns. He also ranks second in the league, averaging 17.5 yards per reception. I talked to you about him being number 1 in terms of yards per target, second in yards per reception. He's also top 10 in yards after the catch per reception, and 13th amongst receivers in terms of fantasy points per touch. A lot of these numbers I get from fantasy sites because they go in depth of, do I want George Pickens or do I want Devontae Smith in fantasy? Well, when he touches the ball, he produces. And that's basically the bottom line. And it's very encouraging. I mean, I think you guys think I'm down on Pickens, which I don't understand. BetOnline is your number 1 source for all your summer sports this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NBA, and NHL playoffs. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so as mentioned, I have some Tomlin stuff as well. And this is more win-loss, this type of thing. So here I have 3 different nuggets, all of which paint Tomlin in a pretty strong light, by the way. For the past 5 years, the Steelers have had a negative point differential. They've been outscored by their opponents 4 of the last 5 years. Despite that, over that time, they're 38-30-1 in those 4 seasons they've been outscored. So they were outscored 4 of the last 5 years, and in those 4 years, they've won 8 more games than they've lost. And this also over that 5-year period, only 12 other teams have had a season where they've had a negative point differential with a 500 or better record. So it's happened 12 times. Meaning the Steelers own 25% of those. See what I'm saying? 12 times over the last 5 years, a team has a 500 or better record with a negative point differential. The Steelers own a quarter of those. It's not an accident, is my point. It's the art of winning one-score games. It's the art of, man, I don't have as good a cards in my hand as my opponent at the poker table, but I finessed them or scammed them or, owned them to the point where I still got the win and I pulled in the pot. And that's what we're doing here, is finding out ways to win. They've done it. Defense, making plays on special teams. So here's some more further evidence along those lines. This one comes from Pro Football Focus. It's astounding that the Steelers made the playoffs despite ranking 23rd in Pro Football Focus's passing grade and 31st in pass blocking grade last year. In fact, they were the only team to make the postseason that placed in the bottom 10 in both facets. 23rd and 31st. Nobody else in the bottom 10 in either one made the playoffs. And 14 teams make the playoffs now? It's almost half the league. A big thing to me there, and this goes back 20 years, that if there's one thing you want to be great at, it's probably passing the football on offense, because it sustains year after year, usually because you have a great quarterback, etc. And it's just really hard to overcome being a poor passing team. You can look at any year, any metric, DVOA, EPA, yards per pass, quarterback rating per team. If you look at the bottom teams in the league in passing grade, they're always the worst teams in the league. And the Steelers have been at the bottom of the league in passing grade now for 5 years in a row. And they still are competitive. I know you guys want them to win the Super Bowl every year and finally win a playoff game. I do too. But considering those things, and hey, Tomlin has something to do with them having a bad passing grade. I don't think he's hired very good coordinators, especially Matt Canada. I mean, that really is concerning to me. But this is a pivotal year, and I think Arthur Smith's different. We'll see. Maybe he's not. Last thing I have. I think this will blow you away. In the 2020s, okay, this decade so far, which we're getting to be about halfway through. We all know it's 2024, but that's a pretty good sample size. Since 2020, only 5 teams have a better winning percentage than the Steelers. Think about that. I mean, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, Dallas, the Niners. I mean, these teams that have been perennial winners over the last handful of years, only 5 teams out of 32 have a better winning percentage in the 2020s. Take it a step further, I'll add this to the mix. Has anyone, maybe the Jets, maybe the Panthers, during that stretch, during the 2020s, had worse quarterback situation than the Steelers? Played with worse quarterbacks than the Steelers? They're bottom 5. With all respect to Ben, end of career Ben was pretty rough. See what I'm saying? I mean, at a minimum, Tomlin more than deserves a 3-year stretch here to say a new handpicked coordinator from outside the organization that has had success before with different quarterbacks. Let me see what I can do against a loaded AFC. That's all I'm saying. All right, guys, take care. Over now.